everybody, and welcome back to the Drive Pink Dialogue. We are 1 hour from kickoff. It is the first time we've ever previewed an Inter Miami 2 team game. It is the return of the Herons in the U.S. Open Cup. It is the B team, but we thought a way to celebrate would be to sort of preview that game a little bit and sort of have an Inter Miami discussion about lots of different topics: Messi, Obando, Baltasar, Drake Callender, lots of different things over the course of this episode, but it would be a fun lead-in to the U.S. Open Cup, which starts in about an hour between Inter Miami 2 and Miami United. Saur, my host, my friend, and my lovely guest partner on this show, how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling great. As I was saying, I'm very tired because work gets in the way sometimes of just general life. But what better way than to just decompress, relax, and get back into a nice, calming mood than to talk Inter Miami and football with you, my lovely co-host, Scotty. I'm great. How are you?
I'm feeling good. I feel like we have just gone from game to game to game to game to game for the past month. And so I just looked it up, and it's been over a month since we've had a chance to just get on the mic and not be pre-game, post-game, game recap, pre-game, post-game, game recap. So I'm actually excited to just relax a little bit and have some fun conversations. In fact, we are going to talk about the U.S. Open Cup, but a lot of the other things we're going to talk about are things that we went and said that is probably a discussion for another time. Well, this is that other time, and so we're going to have a couple of those discussions today. And I just want to thank you for being a part of this. I know your life is super hectic right now, but I think it's a great way to lead up to the Open Cup and have some fun conversations along the way. So thank you for being here. The U.S. Open Cup, Inter Miami was this close to winning the cup 2 years ago. And by this close, I mean, this is the size of the injury Messi had in his hamstring or wherever it was at that point. But Inter Miami faces Houston in South Florida at Chase Stadium in the U.S. Open Cup final. They had that incredibly dramatic and fun win at Cincinnati in the semifinals, with highlighted by that Campana goal in the 97th minute to send us to extra time. And then they won on penalties. And then Messi gets hurt, and he was back in 2023 sort of the guiding force. And it felt like with him on the field, we were invincible. And without him, we almost reverted right back to the team that could barely gain points in the first half of the season. But I remember that Open Cup run, and it's a shame it didn't result in a trophy, because that was basically the only good thing that happened for the first half of that season until Messi arrived. It was, loss, but then in a midweek game, we would play Miami FC, and we would get a stoppage time, get an overtime victory, or get a penalties victory. We played Nashville, and there was a thunderstorm that had to stop the game in the second half, but we come back, and Nico Stefanelli, of all people, helped get the game-winning goal. And, just so many moments against interesting teams that we have never played before and we haven't played since, that got us to that moment. And then ultimately the U.S. Open Cup semifinal was incredible when Messi did join the team. And then the final, I think, very bitter and disappointing because we didn't get to take that game with two hands and really put our best foot forward. We end up losing it 2-1. And then we don't get a chance to make up for it in 2024 because the MLS pulled out of that tournament. They ended up reinserting a few teams. But the first step towards reintegrating the MLS into that tournament has happened this year. I believe there's 16 MLS teams and a number, maybe 10 MLS 2 teams or MLS Next Pro teams, including Inter Miami 2, participating in this tournament. And I, for one, am excited that Inter Miami is making its way back into this tournament.
You recapped it very well. And it almost feels like an eternity ago, back when we supported a completely different team, back when Inter Miami was just another MLS team without Messi. If Messi stepped out, Inter Miami would revert to being a regular team. We've come so far from those moments that you just described that now if Messi sits out, we're still confident in our team to go out and win a game and honestly go out and win a tournament. Hopefully we never have to experience that again. But it just goes to show the steps that we've taken since that game against Houston in the US Open Cup final. And it's a shame that we haven't been able to actually gel together as a well-integrated squad with Messi completely embedded in and play that tournament again, because we got so close to winning it. And yet we never got an opportunity to go back into the finals and get redemption. This is some sort of a semblance of that redemption arc, I guess, with Inter Miami 2 getting back into it. I doubt we're going to get far, but I hope we do. And maybe we get a few surprises here. But I'm just glad that we get to see our Herons wear the jersey and step out for a game that's in the US Open Cup. And you never know, maybe next year we're back in it with Messi playing and competing for that US Open Cup, and hopefully completing the set of trophies that we're about to win this season.
Yeah, and that's, I think, the thing. There's so many arguments for why MLS teams should or shouldn't participate in the U.S. Open Cup, and I actually find most of them quite uninspiring in terms of how convincing they are. And again, we're still waiting for our lineup for Inter Miami 2. We are playing Miami United tonight, by the way, not Miami FC. And I know that can sound confusing. Miami FC is a USL championship team. That's the second division of the U.S. soccer pyramid. Miami United, the team we are playing tonight, is and let me make sure I get this right, a UPSL team. I don't know where that ranks in the hierarchy of professional soccer, but my assumption is that this is a semi-pro team that Inter Miami 2 certainly has a real chance to beat tonight. We're not exactly sure who's going to suit up for Inter Miami 2. 10, maybe 9 MLS players, first-team players, are eligible to play for that team. Now, some of them obviously aren't going to play. Guys like Yannick Bright, Ian Frey, they're obviously not going to play in this tournament. But, and maybe not tonight, but moving forward, guys like Santi Morales, guys like Leo Alfonso, guys like Rocco Rios Novo could end up being a part of this team and leading them. And if they're playing teams like Miami United, they have a chance to win a couple games and I think build a little bit of spirit. And of course, it's a great way to get some competitive games against grown men, right?
Yeah, and you mentioned Santi Morales, you mentioned Leo Alfonso. They're match winners for Inter Miami's first team. Leo Alfonso with that last-minute goal against Philadelphia when Inter Miami was down to 9 men. Santi Morales providing that assist against Cavalier to get us a very crucial second goal to take us into the next round. These are match winners, and they should be playing these games in the US Open Cup, because not only do they get the minutes in their legs, but also they get to compete on a regular basis against some really good teams. And I think this will be a really good opportunity for them to just build up some of their confidence. And now that they've gained that experience of playing in the first team, go and apply some of those skill sets that they've developed with an age group that's more appropriate to them. And hopefully by playing this tournament, they become even more equipped to play with the first team. But absolutely right, we have a fair few good names who can suit up tonight. But you never know, if we continue to win a few games in the US Open Cup, eventually we may even see someone like Ian Frey or Yannick Bright play in this tournament. I doubt that, but we can have wishful thinking, right?
Well, I also think if Inter Miami can show that it's actually worthwhile to participate in this tournament, we might be the A team back. Now, here's what I will say long term about the US Open Cup. Next year, the U.S. is hosting the World Cup in the summer, and the MLS is taking a huge break. And I think Inter Miami is going to be taking a huge break for that. And as they should, the World Cup is a huge deal. But that's going to make the schedule congestion even tougher when you cut out a whole month of the season from the game. So Inter Miami probably is not going to be in 2025. Probably not going to be in 2026, but I think if they can get some momentum towards returning to the U.S. Open Cup in 2027, I think that would be great. And one of the topics I have for us to potentially discuss tonight, if we have time, is the USL and how these two leagues are going to find a way to coexist with all the changes that are going on in USL. We can talk about that later if we get to it, but I really do hope Inter Miami in 2027 is back in this tournament, because it is a tournament that I think has more prestige in winning than some of these other tournaments.
Isn't it like the oldest tournament in the world, one of the oldest tournaments in the world or something? It's wild.
It is, but that's not where the prestige comes from. Here's what I will say. I think a lot of people got in this idea that there was a Leagues Cup versus a US Open Cup debate, and it was one or the other. I thought that was always foolish. I never understood the arguments for why it had to be that type of dichotomy. And moreover, the first year of the Leagues Cup was really fun, especially for Inter Miami fans, because of course it was the arrival of Lionel Messi and we went all the way and won the tournament. I'm not sure all MLS fans felt that way. I know most Liga MX fans didn't feel that way. And I'm 100% sure that year 2 of that tournament was not nearly as interesting or fun as year 1. The novelty had certainly worn off and the arrival of the superstar had worn off and the sort of Liga MX versus MLS of itness had worn off a bit. So they are drastically changing that tournament this year. We will see if they can get back some of that sort of excitement and anticipation. But for now, I think holding that tournament up like it's a model for what the future should look like, I think is a serious mistake. I'm not sure that tournament has a significantly long time moving forward unless they drastically improve it or change it, which is the same sort of things they say about the US Open Cup. And so if you are going to let it be driven down to nothing because people have complaints, you're going to end up with nothing. And it's really doesn't matter who the opponents are. I did have a couple talking points or arguments for the US Open Cup I wanted to bring in, but before I do, should we get to the breaking news? Because the lineup's still not out. So let's just get to the breaking news. We'll come back to the Open Cup. And that's Allen Obando in South Florida. Fabrizio Romano broke this about 25 minutes ago. So real breaking news. We expected him to be in South Florida last week. He is officially in South Florida now. He should do his medical tomorrow. I would hope the team announces him over the next couple of days, but everything for him to be officially available and ready to go for that Philadelphia game in 10 days is proceeding. And I think this is a huge, huge addition.
We've been talking about him for so long. I said this before, it almost feels like he's already an Inter Miami player for the last 2 months. We've heard of him. We've looked at his footage. We've analyzed some of it. And boy, am I excited. There's so much potential in this player. We always spoke about in the offseason how a backup striker just does not need to be somebody who's a veteran, who can deputize to Luis Suarez on a regular basis, somebody who's experienced. Instead, it needs to be someone who offers a different skill set than Luis Suarez, who can learn from Luis Suarez, and honestly brings a little bit of freshness and physicality and youth to the front line that we are desiring. And Allen Obando is the perfect example of the kind of player we need to bring in to deputize for Luis Suarez. He may not get that many minutes. He hasn't played that many minutes. But just the fact that this potential exists in the squad now, we've already seen what somebody like Segovia and Allende have been able to work wonders with playing next to Messi and Suarez. I am so excited for Allen Obando. He's going to absolutely make a difference in instances that we might not rate right now, but I am sure there's going to be games where he can have an impact, and we're going to look back and say, these were the games that won us the Supporter Shield or the MLS Cup. And I do think he's going to have a really big impact in this team. Not to over-exaggerate or overstate any of it, he's still a very young player who doesn't have that much experience, so we need to temper our expectations. But that's not to say we can't enjoy a new shiny object, right? We're always going to overhype our players coming in. I'm so excited for it, man. And honestly, we could do an entire podcast on him because he's really good as a player and a potential.
Yeah, we recorded a preseason preview, the Chat Stats and Fun Facts, a 20-minute video on him. And then we never released it because this new front office, since Guillermo Hoyos took over, ends up taking a month to get every deal across the line. But it is exciting to have this player. We have talked a lot. Now, let me say, we've talked a lot about rotation and how guys like Suarez and Alba and Busquets and Segovia have not gotten enough time off the field and rotated in some other guys. So I'm a little concerned, and I want to make sure we actually get Obando getting real playing time. He is incredibly young. I know the highlights are very impressive. I know the hype is very impressive. He's never played more than 500 career minutes in a season, or 530, something like that. So for him, I think it's very important to come in and just be available because he's going to earn minutes if he can just be ready. And it's not about showing off. It's not about scoring a goal every time. It's about just making sure he can be a body that has the physical attributes to come in and help the team, whether it's pressing, whether it's defensively. And then as you get more comfortable, as you get more sort of instigated into the team, you will get the opportunity to make the highlight plays, score the big goals, all of those things. I'm 1,000% confident that there will be people in our chat this year talking about how Obando was awful in this game, but it's going to be worth it long term because he's going to develop into a wonderful player. So I'm incredibly excited for Obando as well. I'm saving my getting this Euphoria kit because I'm thinking I want to get Allen Obando. He's only going to be here 1 year, but I'm very excited to have that jersey because in 10 years, I think it's going to be a real nice piece of memorabilia. And then the opposite is Baltasar. He's coming in. We already know he's confirmed, but again, he's going through the work permit process. We expect him to be available for Philadelphia. Another big piece when we're talking about trying to get Talasco Segovia some rest, trying to make Robert Taylor and Fafa Picault and Benjamin Kramaski sort of earn their minutes. It's just another piece of the competition that's going to be incredibly exciting. And as we talk about Lionel Messi in a little bit, he's going to be a big factor in sort of helping this team when Messi's not available.
Is this it though? Is this transfer business done? Do we expect anybody else to come in?
Incomings, I think we're done until the summer. Yeah.
I think Baltasar Rodriguez is a good way to end it, not just because he has a badass name, but also that's a great signing as well. Someone we've been looking at for a while. I think he's going to get more minutes than Obando, obviously. You never know. He might even get to start more games than we're expecting him to. But that front line is looking spicy, man. With Messi in the middle, Segovia, Allende, Obando, Baltasar Rodriguez, Benjamin Kramaski, Robert Taylor, Fafa Picault. We could put out two separate front lines and still win every single game with that. I am ecstatic and honestly so impressed by how well the front office has done in bringing these names in. Names that are not big in the footballing world, they're not marquee statement signings, but they're names that this team needed, exactly what we wanted. And they're just going to make this team even better. So super excited for that. I actually don't entirely agree with you whether we're going to be done with our incomings, because if Drake Callender leaves, we might actually see another goalkeeper come in. Maybe, maybe not, but I'm going to be watching out for that.
I'd be honest. If we were going to bring in anyone else, it would be a backup left back, and hopefully an American. Because I don't know if there's a kid on the B team that's sort of ready to step up to the A team at that specific spot. Because I'm not sure Noah Allen is going to be able to be both the starting left-sided center back and the backup left back. And you really run the risk of going down on if either him or Jordy has a problem.
Honestly, with the way Noah Allen's playing, he could probably play goalkeeper. At this point, with his confidence, it's insane what he's doing. But yes, you're right.
It's all about when you don't have your best 11 or when you have to sort of rotate a little bit. Sean says in the chat, Tyler Hall can play the whole back line. Tyler Hall is not eligible for the MLS season this year because they put him on they loaned him back to Inter Miami too. So it freed up a roster slot, but he's not going to be able to help Inter Miami. Listen, the MLS rules change every year, so maybe they've made a slight adjustment to that. But as of last year, they weren't able to play a player that they had loaned to their own B team. So I don't know if that's going to happen. Justin says we got Boatwright. Boatwright's more of a right-sided player. He's also coming off an ACL injury. Outgoings, though, Julian Gressel feels like it has to happen because he's not even making the bench, and he's too good for that, I think.
Yeah, honestly, that's a bit of a disappointment. I don't want to say we've treated him badly, but we haven't necessarily given him the stature of someone who's won the MLS Cup. I think he's the only player on the squad who has won the MLS Cup. And I know you mentioned this before, but there's definitely utility in using Julian Gressel, whether you're trying to move him on or not. I think at this point in time, when you have a few injuries, you can still have him on the bench, make use of his talents in some way or another. Put him out there on the pitch to not just keep him fresh, but tell teams that he's still that player who will add value to their squad, and it could potentially drive up his value as well. So I'm a little surprised with this treatment. I'm sure the story is going to come out eventually about what's going on, who had the falling out with who, whether it was Javier Mascherano's decision to keep him out of the squad or what it is, but he's gone. for all intents and purposes, he is gone. And I feel like we're now just waiting to get the most appropriate offer for him. And it's going to be super awkward if we don't actually get that deal over the line and he's still on the squad and the roster by the end of the transfer window, because then what do you do with him? Do you ostracize him to the sidelines? Do you play him in games? How does that affect the locker room? What's going to happen with the team dynamics? So many question marks. And honestly, we're coming really close to the deadline as well, less than a month left. So it's going to be surprising how they treat Julian Gressel and what comes of it. But for me, I think he's gone. And then the other one's Drake Callender that I'm looking at. You obviously gave that scoop about how there has definitely been some sort of falling out. But yeah, I'm going to reserve that for another talking point.
Well, yeah, let's hold off on Drake for a second. Did we hit exactly what's going on with Julian Gressel in our last episode? Like, is there a deal lined up with LAFC? And it's just we're waiting until after the CONCACAF Champions Cup.
I don't want to take credit for that, because I think there was someone in the chat who mentioned.
Okay, maybe it was someone in the chat. Okay,
yeah,
I apologize.
It wasn't us. But they seem to have struck a chord there. I definitely think that's something that could be going on, because it's possible, right? And LAFC seems to be one of the names that have been touted out for Julian Gressel's potential departure. So we are potentially waiting for that game and before we send him out. Who knows? That'll be quite funny, but also interesting.
It would be super annoying, I'm sure, for Julian, because that second leg won't be until the 13th of April, which is almost 4 weeks away. But if you're talking about a competitive team in a competitive tournament, you don't want to give them an advantage. And Julian Gressel, if that's true, like, it would be an acknowledgement that they think that Julian Gressel could be a part of beating them, and yet they don't think he's good enough to actually play for them. That would be, I think, an ironic commentary if it comes to that. No, I'm surprised he's not gone yet. And I really like Julian Gressel. I think he's a good player, but just how everything's gone, he's too good of a player to just not be making the bench, not be making appearances. Even last year under Tata Martino, when he did eventually, get moved to the bench, he would be the first guy off the field or onto the field in like the 60th minute, all the way up until the playoffs. So, like, everyone recognizes this guy's too good. He's too experienced. He's too much of a veteran to just not play at all. So they got to move him. And the question is where and when, and hopefully it happens soon, because I hate to have this drag on. I hate to have this be a storyline. And for Julian's sake, like, I want him to get settled into his new place and have an impact and enjoy his soccer. So,
and just when we were starting to like him as a player as well, I know we've mentioned our frustrations with him over the last season, and sometimes he was overplayed, but I don't think at any point it was by his own fault. And often at times he was played in the wrong position and not utilized properly. That being said, every time he stepped on the pitch, he's been a professional and actually made a lot more contributions than we gave him credit for. So he's going to have a good. I will have a good memory about Julian Gressel.
Me too.
Last season.
Too.
So.
Me too. Okay, let's talk about Drake, because this is the much more pressing situation. I think it's easy for us to understand that Julian Gressel is 5th on the depth chart or lower in terms of that, wing spot. And that, even if he was fully integrated into the team, he'd be coming off the bench and maybe not even every game. So I think it's easier for us to say, okay, he doesn't fit the system, let's move him on. Drake, I think, is a little bit tougher, because I think 2 months ago, right, on January 19th, we thought Drake Callender was going to be the starter. Probably on February 19th, we thought there's a good chance Drake was going to be a starter. And we haven't seen him yet. There are questions about how fit he is. I know, whether you want to say he's 100% or he's 95%, like, he's good enough to play if they needed him to play, but the injury could still be hanging over his head. But I think it's clear at this point, and it has been reported, if you look hard enough for it, that Mascherano has told Drake that Ustadi's going to be his number one keeper, or is his number one keeper, and that Drake's not going to have an opportunity to compete for it. So how do you feel about that?
I have mixed feelings. I think Javier Mascherano's decision has sort of been vindicated by how well Ustari's been playing. And I remember saying at the start of the off season, actually, that I'm okay with competition in places, and if one player performs better, he deserves to be on the team sheet in the starting 11. And Oscar Ustari has had a really good start to the season, barring that one red card that was debatable, contentious. Overall, he's done well. So I can understand why Drake Callender's position in the starting 11 at least is a little bit precarious. And if I was the coach, I would obviously tell Drake that it's hard to drop Ustari at this point in time. So he will have to fight for his position in the starting 11. If Drake's unwilling to do that, that for me would be, I can understand it, but a little bit problematic because I feel like Ustari hasn't put a foot wrong yet for Drake to actually deserve that starting 11 spot. But there's plenty of games going out. So if Drake Callender does stay as a second choice goalkeeper, he is going to get enough opportunities to try and put together a string of good performances where he becomes the first choice goalkeeper. All of this is hypothetical and honestly been pushed out of the window because I think he's been demoted down to the third choice goalkeeper. You said it, it's been reported widely. He's not going to be considered for selection at this point in time. I think what's happened is Drake Callender realized Oscar Ustari is going to be the starting goalkeeper. And I think he's come to the conclusion that he doesn't want to compete for that position. He doesn't want to sit around, be the second choice goalkeeper, and it's better for him to move on. If that's the case, I can understand that. Drake Callender is too talented for him to stay on the squad as a second choice. And honestly, good luck to him if he decides to go out there and become a first choice somewhere else, because he's done enough for this team to deserve at least some sort of a benefit of doubt and given a string of performances to actually prove himself, right?
I want to be careful because we're only reporting that Drake was told by Mascherano. We're not reporting anything. We're just repeating what was reported. He was told
yet.
Right, he was told by Mascherano that he wasn't going to be the number one keeper, and he wasn't going to be given a chance to be the number one keeper, and that from that point on, it felt like Drake has been sort of frozen out. Clearly, what we have seen with our own eyes is when Drake had an opportunity to play because Ustari was suspended, it was Rocco Rios Novo, which I think makes it pretty clear that even though Drake was available, he's the third string keeper, not based on talent. I'm a little worried about Rocco, but a conversation for another day. I guess maybe today is the right time for that conversation. But I think this means you got to move Drake on too, because if he wants to be a starting goalkeeper and he's frustrated that he's not being given at least an opportunity to compete for it, it's not a great situation. And I love Drake Callender as a keeper. I understand Ustari being the number one keeper. He's been incredible. So I wonder if Drake Callender is also going to get moved in the near future. I don't know if I would love that, because I don't know if I really trust Rocco Rios Novo in case something does happen to Ustari. But I don't know if that's a good situation to have. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes, of course.
Do you think that Rocco Rios Novo situation, with him starting that game where even though Drake Callender was on the bench, he didn't get a start, was that I think that was after the conversation he's had with Javi Mascherano. So that's obviously a result of, I don't think Rocco Rios Novo would have started that game if Drake Callender and Javi Mascherano had good relations at this point in time, right? Yeah. So that, I think, is a little bit of a reflection of how things have gone on behind the scenes. And honestly, the closer we get to the deadline day for transfer window, I feel like if Drake Callender doesn't get a run out, it's just going to be confirmed that he's probably going to leave.
Well, but I guess what would cause him to get a run out? Because clearly Mascherano doesn't rotate his top guys a lot, and it's certainly a goalkeeper doesn't. If he's not rotating his outfield players, he's probably not going to rotate his goalkeepers ever. And even when there was an opportunity that presented itself, he wasn't the guy. So he's never going to get an opportunity to build himself into shape. He's never going to get himself an opportunity to get a string of games to build his own form, or to impress trade partners, or to impress Mascherano. So what does it mean in terms of having Drake back in goal or even back on the roster? How could he even earn the second job back? I don't know.
I feel like what's going to happen is, if we don't move Drake Callender on, there's going to either be an impasse where he just sits on the bench for the rest of the summer until the summer transfer window, or they're going to bury the hatchet, put their egos aside, and then Drake Callender is going to eventually start fighting for his spot on the starting 11. As I said, there's so many games going around. It's not possible that Drake Callender doesn't get a run out if he stays on this team. We have way too many games, and there's going to be plenty of opportunities. So I do think if he stays on after the transfer window closes, the situation might eventually resolve itself. If not, he's probably going to just sit on the bench, and that's a really sour taste in my mouth because I don't want a potential club legend to be treated that way. Whatever other people say, I know there's a lot of debate about whether Drake Callender is actually a club legend or whether he's deserved of the respect that we should give him. But he has the most appearances. He is the second captain of this team at this point in time, technically. So there's a lot to talk about here, I think.
And listen, this is a guy that has the respect of his teammates. So it's there's no reason for us to think he would be a problem in the locker room or anything like that. Like he's for all intents and purposes, and as far as we can tell, he's a great guy. But it becomes sort of an untenable situation, especially if he's not even the backup, because then you're saying, just like you are with Julian Gressel, you're not even a part of the team, really, because clearly it's for Rocco Rios Novo to be ahead of him. It's not a talent question. It's something else. And if that's going to continue to be the case long term, I don't know how this ends in a good way other than just everyone shaking hands and moving on, which is tough because I really like Drake. So,
yeah.
Are those the only two players that feel like they're not a part of this team? Even Robert Taylor has felt more a part of this team since the start of the season. So I don't think he's moving or out. That's not part of my expectations. Although I suppose with Baltasar and Allen Obando coming in, maybe he could be a guy that doesn't have a ton of playing time in his future. I'm just speculating here. And I think everyone else is pretty settled in. So when we're talking about the rest of this transfer window, I feel like those are the two names to watch going out, and we're about to sign or we're about to make official the two guys coming in.
Yeah, I think Robert Taylor is a lot more sorted in the sense that his position on the team is more or less confirmed. He didn't get that many starts under Tata Martino. I think it's continued under Javi Mascherano, but he did get one start in the season, and he's going to get minutes once he's fully fit as well. So I'm not too worried about him. And honestly, the talent level on this team has absolutely skyrocketed since last season. So there's a case to be made that Robert Taylor is further down the pecking order. That being said, he's going to be very useful on the bench as well for us. And there's games that we both said that Robert Taylor would actually do a lot better in the front line. So I'm sure he's going to get minutes going forward. I know this podcast was supposed to be about the Inter Miami 2 game. So I'll let you guide the conversation back to that. But this roster has shaped up really well, and I feel like everything has gone on too well in the last few games for Inter Miami, at least since the start of the season. So I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop, and maybe that's the skeptic football fan in me, having gone through a lot of pain with my other clubs. But I feel like this team is developing into an absolute beast, and we might be in for a fantastic season.
It would be pretty cool, wouldn't it? Okay, I have the lineup, so if you'll excuse me while I hold my sneeze back for a second, I will get to it. There is no senior team players aside from Tyler Hall in this 11. And by the way, a very interesting post from Sarakti in the chat who says, I played UPSL in Dallas. It's third division semi-pro, varying levels of play, but IMCF2 should wipe the floor. So that's encouraging if you're getting ready to watch this game. It should be a good night for Inter Miami. Listen, we're not experts on the B team, but there are a couple players that we do know, and it starts with the center back partnership, who I think most Inter Miami fans will be most familiar with, and it's Tyler Hall and it's Giovanni Farina. Tyler Hall, obviously the one first-team player. He's been loaned back to the B team. He's 18 years old. He is someone that's already earned his homegrown contract, so a guy that Inter Miami likes and sees a future in. We saw a little bit of him in the preseason. Giovanni Farina, a player they loaned in last summer or last spring from Boca Juniors. They loaned him into the B team. He played last year with the B team. They brought him back this year. I've never really understood that situation, but he is 20, 21 maybe now, has more experience, has an Argentine background at Boca Juniors coming through that academy. Those two should be a pretty solid defensive partnership in the back for Inter Miami 2 tonight.
That's an interesting one. Tyler Hall, I know we're all familiar with. I think he's a really promising prospect. Can play across the back line actually on the as a right back as well, but also in centre back. Good on the ball, has a lot of talent and very skillful. Serena, I know for you is one of a big question mark about what he's doing here. I know you love to talk about that, but he's captaining this team again. I think he's the designated captain for Inter Miami too. Interesting that he's decided to forego his career in Boca Juniors and actually play for Inter Miami too. Maybe there's a pathway for him into the first team. I'm not sure. I would love to see how those two actually pair up in this game and what they do, and I'm excited to see them in the back line. Hopefully, Inter Miami can actually keep a clean sheet.
Yeah. Again, we're not super familiar, but a couple other names that I am familiar with. Bailey Sparks, Inter Miami's first draft pick in this past year's draft class. They got rid of a lot of their older players on this roster. They had a lot more 20, 21, 22, 23-year-olds last season and in the past. This year, a lot of those guys seem to have moved on, and they're playing with a bunch of teenagers. So one of the veterans, Bailey Sparks, 22, coming out of SMU, a second-round pick for Inter Miami. He's in the midfield next to Ricardo Montenegro. Montenegro is a guy that has gotten called up to the A team for, that short-term loan to be bench depth in the past. So those two should be a pretty solid partnership in the midfield. And then some interesting prospects up front. Yuval Cohen, Flores de la Paz, Eltser Zubida, who had a couple goals this past week. Some interesting talents. I'm going to go find this before I mention it, but go ahead. I'll let you respond because I got to find this kid's name.
Yeah, and again, we're not super familiar with this team, so I don't know how intelligibly we can talk about some of these players, but looks like an interesting team, man. As was mentioned in the chat, I think this team should be able to do job against this Miami side. And I'm just excited to see what we actually end up doing. There's going to be a lot. I think I'm going to learn about Inter Miami too. I know you follow it a little bit more closely. So that'll be good to see. But some familiar faces, some new faces overall. I know Bailey Sparks coming from the Super Draft. We've already had a very successful Super Draft pick last year, obviously, in Yannick Bright. So if he can even do 10% of what Yannick Bright has done for this team already, I'm sure he's going to have a good career at Inter Miami. I've heard some really good positive things about Bailey Sparks. I know Apia was our other draft pick, who I'm not sure is still on the team or not. So that's interesting that the front office has decided to keep Bailey Sparks, and he might actually be a good signing for us through the Super Draft process. I'm excited for him. I've heard good things about him, and it'll be interesting to see how he plays tonight.
Yeah, the other kid I wanted to mention, and he's not playing tonight, which is really disappointing, but there's a young Haitian kid named Lovens Delanois, who is electrically fast. I was watching their first couple games of the MLS Next Pro season. He is electric. I don't know how good he is in the final third or whatever, but he's 17 or something, 18. Very young, but super pacey. He has that professional pace that not every kid at this level has. So a name to keep in mind. Brian Destin, another one with that pace. Neither of those guys are playing tonight, which is disappointing. One name to keep an eye on off the bench, Jack Pym. Actually, there's a couple. Nicholas De Almeida, a nice defender, but Jack Pym, a midfielder that has a pretty nice foot. Think Jack McGlynn, if that's sort of up your alley, if you're really into it. But those are the kids to watch. Listen, we understand this is the B team, but it is Inter Miami. It is the Herons in the U.S. Open Cup, and we thought it would be fun to pay attention and support. Neither of us are in South Florida tonight, so we couldn't get tickets. But this was our next best way is to help sort of generate some interest and some views going into this game. So that's what we wanted to do. Again, we're expecting Inter Miami to be the better team in this game and get to work on potentially getting to the next round, which would be awesome. I think it would be fun little side quest to watch this team go a couple rounds in this tournament this year. So we're both looking forward to that.
Absolutely. I know there's a couple of comments in the chat about why I'm so busy. I'm just busy saving the world, guys. That's all I do.
No, you can't say that. You have to be humble and modest. I'm the one who gets to tell people that you're saving the world. because it
All
is
right, how
true.
about you say it, and then I'll nod.
Yeah. Saur's very busy saving the world, helping children in, what was it this time? Kenya, Uganda, Australia, somewhere. I don't know. Okay, let's get to another conversation because I want to finish with an argument for the U.S. Open Cup. But Lionel Messi's got a little bit of an injury, and I think it'll be interesting to have a conversation about the expectations for this team in 2025, considering now after a month of games, 8 games, Messi only played, I believe, 4, that the team is still good without Lionel Messi. And so, and that we should also understand Messi's not going to play 31 MLS games like I had hoped and was optimistic about in the preseason. Assuming we get a similar number of games from Lionel Messi this year, does it drastically change the expectations for this team in 2025?
I feel like it'll be less straightforward if that's the case. If Messi doesn't play as many games or plays the same number of games as last season, I don't know if we can repeat the same string of results that we had last season. And I know our squad is slightly better than last season, but I will be a little bit more worried about the surety with which we can win games. And I think it's just going to become a little bit more tenuous about how we finish games and how we can perform at a high level continuously. That being said, this team continues to surprise me and it hasn't given us a reason to doubt them. But it's just the fact that if Messi plays, every single time he plays, he's just the X factor and the difference, right? And it's never fun losing that X factor and the surety that you're going to absolutely blow teams out of the water and score 5 goals on them. So I think we're going to have to continue to perform at a very, very high level for a long period of time if Messi doesn't stay fit. And that just sort of slows down the momentum with which this team has been playing. And I'll just say it this way. If Messi doesn't play as many games, we'll go down from winning 4 show trophies to maybe 2 this time around.
Sorry, I got lost in the chat for a second. They're guessing what you do, and someone said the United Nations. Didn't you spend some time with the UN back in Geneva?
I can neither confirm nor deny that.
That's a serious question. That's me and Saur met back in Geneva, out in Geneva. Anyways, back to Inter Miami. Listen, the thing I hate so much is this constant conversation about Messi. And so the thing I want most of all is Inter Miami to be so good that Messi playing is cool and it's a nice bonus, but that the team isn't going to have their season be derailed. And it's no longer a question of, is this team even capable of winning games? Is this team even worth talking about if there's no Lionel Messi? Like, this is a good team. I truly believe that. Even if you take Lionel Messi off, it is the deepest, strongest roster. I think even without Lionel Messi, it's the best roster in the MLS without question. And so the reason I bring this up is because I want us to get to a point collectively that we can move past asking if Messi's going to play every game and worrying about if Messi's going to play every game, because we still feel confident that whether he is or not, and hopefully he plays more than he doesn't because it's fun to watch him play. But even if he doesn't, Inter Miami still goes into that game as the favorite, and we don't have to worry about how we're going to score goals or how we're going to create offense, because there is so much offense and there's so much balance in this team. And the system, unlike last year, it doesn't change when he's on the field and when he's not, right? Remember last year, we'd play much more conservatively and we would rely heavily on Julian Gress on that right wing spot and transition and much more defensively solid. And then when Messi came back, it was much more open and free-flowing under Tata. This year, we have a system and we stick to it. And when Messi doesn't play, obviously we're not quite as good offensively, but the system stays the same and it's still good enough to get results and be sound defensively. And so I just want us to get to a point where we don't have to talk about Messi every game, whether he's going to be available or not, and still feel good about Inter Miami's chances of winning games.
I think you make a fantastic point about what happened last season versus where we are this season. Last season, I think there was this tenure where obviously Messi was blowing everyone out of the water, hitting MVP numbers, gets injured. Inter Miami starts playing much better than people expected them to. He comes back and it becomes a little bit iffy in the sense that we're not playing as fluidly as some people thought. There were question marks about whether this team is better than Messi for at least 2 or 3 games. And then obviously eventually that got put to rest. But honestly, last season, a lot of it is defined by how well we played in that non-Messi period. This season, we just seem prepared for all scenarios where we know exactly how this team is going to look like without Messi very early on, because Messi did miss a couple of games. We know how this team is going to look like with Messi on the pitch. And honestly, the play style, the way we're structured, the way we play, our patterns of play, how we want to dominate games, it's not different. Last year it was Jekyll and Hyde. We wanted to play defensively when Messi wasn't there. Now Messi is there. We want to play a lot more fluidly. Now in this season, it almost feels like our patterns of play and everything is set across the board. And it's not going to change much with or without Messi. With Messi, it's going to get elevated to a completely different plane, and we're going to look a lot better, more fluid, more X factor, scoring goals for fun. But even without that, we have an identity, and I think that's the biggest difference between the two seasons. And I also want to get away from that point of Messi playing, not playing. But I feel like we have more of an identity as a club that's defined by Messi, but also without Messi, we know what we are.
And also the talent to be fine. Like, again, we've already seen Inter Miami 4 games. I think 4 games without Messi, 4 wins. And obviously, again, I'll never disrespect Messi to say that we're not better with him, because of course we are. But like, I still think there's a difference between being the best team in CONCACAF and being the best team in MLS. And that's the Messi difference, but we're still the best team in MLS. And I want us to keep that in mind when we play LAFC in 2 weeks, when we play Philadelphia in a week and a half. Like, this team can go out and dominate those games and should be the favorite in those games, even without Messi. And we have the talent to like win those games and be the fit. I keep saying the same thing, and so I apologize, but we have the talent to achieve all of the goals we want to, even without Messi. And the only one that feels even remotely questionable is if we have to play in the CONCACAF Champions Cup against one of those Mexican giants. And of course, there's only, I think, one real giant left. So other than that, I think Inter Miami fans should feel this team is absolutely prepared to play without Messi. And if we get him, it's just a bonus, I think.
Yeah, and honestly, it'll be a great place to be where we can say getting Messi is just a bonus. I don't know if we're entirely there yet, but we are getting to that stage where you can sense that this team, even without Messi, is a juggernaut. And I don't want to get ahead of myself, but we are going to win trophies this year. Just saying.
I've already said we're going to win it. I've already committed to 2 trophies, not just 2 trophies generally, but that we're going to win the CONCACAF Champions Cup and we're going to win the Supporters Shield. I just think those are going to happen, and I'm looking forward to being proven right. And then sort of along those lines, last conversation before we get into the Open Cup. And by the way, guys, thank you for sticking with us. I know this is sort of a long and winding road. We wanted to be heavily based on the U.S. Open Cup, but there's a lot of other things we wanted to talk about. So we're kind of weaving back and forth.
And I've enjoyed this conversation because I feel like we've been very structured in how we've been approaching these podcasts because of the game, the post-game show. So I feel like it's often important to just talk about everything in and around Inter Miami rather than about the games themselves. So I hope you're enjoying this conversation as much as I am. And yeah.
And by the way, we put the stream in the description of the video. So if you, I'm sorry, the stream to the U.S. Open Cup game that, again, starts in about 12 minutes. We'll hop off and let you guys watch that game. It is in the link in the description. Last question. We talked about it a few minutes ago. There's a structure that doesn't change. And that's something I want to think about and apply to Javier Mascherano. We've had the rotation conversation a lot. But the fact that the system doesn't change, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. Do you think that is Javier Mascherano? Or do you think that he thinks it's important that I just stick with something until the end of the CONCACAF Champions Cup because I don't want to risk putting out something that doesn't work and I don't want to risk the guys getting confused. So let me just ram this down every single game because I know we have the talent to win games like this. And then maybe after that tournament, when we have a run of MLS games where the stakes fall a little bit, we can try a few other things out. But I'm a new coach implementing a new system. I want to make sure they have this down rock solid before I start introducing anything else. Or do you think this is his system?
I think this is his system. I think this is what he wants to do. He seems to be a very assured coach. And I don't know if you remember when we did the predictions at the start of the season and we talked about what's the one word that's going to define Javier Mascherano this season. I said prepared because he gives off that feeling that he just has a plan and he knows how he wants his team to play and he just prepares for games. And now that plan may not work. The preparedness might fall short, but it feels like he already knows what he wants to do, whether it's with Messi or without Messi, whether it's in attack, whether it's in defense, how he wants to set up his midfield. You can sense that there's a game plan in every single position on the pitch. You know how the left side's going to play versus how the right side's going to play. You know what the striker is going to do. But overall, I think the identity that he wants to play with is already set in stone. He may need to tinker it a few ways whenever the situation demands. But overall, I think this is how he wants to play. And this is Javier Mascherano is doing to set this team up properly and recruit players who fit that system.
Well, and let me be clear. I'm not saying that they run out with the same tactics every single game.
Yeah,
of course. And I think most specifically with the wide players are where you see the week-to-week adjustments or the game-to-game adjustments with this team. But especially up the spine, it is the same thing almost every single game. And the fact that you have similar partnerships building and relationships and chemistry, and we're not getting different formations. We're not getting people in different spaces in the field. They're learning how to play with each other and building into the system. I really do think it's going to benefit this team. And I think if you look back at what caused us the most pain last year early in the season, it was switching to a 3-5-2 and then back to a 4-3-3 and not having a right back once we traded DeAndre Yedlin, and the midfield not having enough defensive solidity and guys running everywhere. And so it was like, let's just pray that our top end talent, guys like Messi and Suarez, were going to score enough goals to get us through. And if they ever failed, you really didn't have anything to rely on going backwards. That's how it felt with Tata Martino every time Messi was on the field. And the few times it didn't feel like that were the times we praised him the most and we were genuinely excited about it. And now it feels like the opposite. It feels like the system is set. It's very structured, defensively sound, and that everything you get going forward is kind of a bonus, and it just allows our best players to be their best players.
2 questions. Is it just me, or up until that Atlanta series, we never really had like a proper system in place? Even in that Atlanta series, we never saw Gressel, and we never had like a fixed way of how we wanted to play in those 3 games.
No, but that wasn't the type of coach Tata was, right? Not every coach is a system coach, and we get that. And there's more than one way to be successful as a coach. That's just not what Tata was. But I did feel like what he put together when he had everyone available wasn't particularly well balanced, and it was also different when he didn't have everyone available and he was forced to sort of adjust to his personnel. And I think what we've hit on this year is a system that allows our best personnel to be on the field and still be defensively sound. And maybe that's just a huge upgrade in talent. Guys like Yannick Bright, Noah Allen emerging, and Maxi Falcone coming in, Gonzalo Lujan, and everyone else we want to talk about. But it feels to me like the coaching has been a real upgrade.
So this brings me to my second question. Did Tata sell us a dream? Because it almost feels like Javier Mascherano, like we had aspirations for last season, but were we actually good last season? Because now it almost feels like this coach has come in and we played 7 games and we look just a completely different side. Whereas last season, there's been personnel changes and stuff, but it just feels such a better coach team, and it's only been 7 or 8 games. So that's what I mean. Like, were we even good last season? Because now it feels like we've hit a different level. So what must be the potential, right?
No, but you're right.
What must be the potential of this team?
We are good. We were good last year, but we were still capable of things like going on the road 1 year ago this week and losing 4-0 to the Red Bulls. Like, we were still capable of that. Now it feels like we've hit another level. And I thought last year we were ahead of the rest of the MLS. Now it feels like we are leaps and bounds ahead of the rest of the MLS. One of the conversations that we talked about having in this episode was how to push the MLS forward and how Inter Miami is sort of doing that. But we decided it was a little too short notice to have a really nuanced conversation. We wanted to sound smart when we had that conversation. So, because it's a really interesting one. But yeah, I do think this team has just hit another level. And a huge part of that, both is the incoming talent, but the coaching just feels a step ahead, really.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Okay, should we get back to the U.S. Open Cup for these final 5 minutes.
I think so. That was the title, so you don't want to clickbait people, right?
That was the title, and we've come back and forth to the U.S. Open Cup, but I have 4 reasons, and I spent 5 minutes gathering my thoughts right before we went live. So I apologize if this isn't exhaustive list, but I have 4 reasons why I really want Inter Miami to be in the U.S. Open Cup moving forward. The first is, if you are not, and by the way, this isn't just Inter Miami, it's all MLS teams, but specifically Inter Miami. If you are not in the CONCACAF Champions Cup, there are no games of consequence early on. And so for all the teams in the MLS, but the 4 still in the MLS Cup, in the CONCACAF Champions Cup, it's just MLS regular season games for the next several months. And that gets tiresome when you play the same teams over and over again. I don't have a ton of fun playing New England as opposed to when we play the Birmingham Legion in a game that matters, because if you lose, you go home, your tournament's over. I love having games of consequence early in the season, and I think that is super, super important for a team and for a fan base to get excited about the early parts of the season. The MLS, it's such a long season in terms of the calendar, and the games, because so many teams make the playoffs, can often feel of low consequence. So having games of high consequence, that excites me in such a huge way. So I think that's one thing that people that argue for or against the US Open Cup, they don't talk about enough. Early games of consequence in the MLS or for MLS teams, I think is so much fun.
Yeah, and some people might even say you can bin the MLS off until you get to the playoffs. So just do the bare minimum to get to the playoffs, and then that's when it actually starts to matter. And honestly, they would have a point, right? That's not the best way to approach it, obviously. But
how many times have we seen in the chat that the supporter shield doesn't matter?
yeah, exactly. And I think that's just the general sentiment all around. Whereas tournament football is tournament football. There's just a sense of urgency and fun to it. And honestly, every game matters in the sense that you lose, you're out. I feel a lot more jittery, a lot more anxious when we're doing the pregame shows for the CONCACAF Champions Cup, because I know one bad decision, one unlucky moment by a goalkeeper getting a red card might not matter in the MLS as much. You just end up losing 3 points, but it would matter so much more because you end up getting knocked out, right?
And even if you play another MLS team, like imagine the difference between playing NYCFC in an MLS game where you know you're going to lose or get a draw or something silly.
We already have the example for that. We played Kansas City, and it felt like a different. It felt like a different vibe.
So much more fun.
So much more fun.
So much more fun.
Even though we actually blew them. So,
but it was still nerve-wracking because we went into that game thinking it's going to be freezing. Like if they can take advantage of this, we could be in a lot of trouble. So the stakes were so much higher. I'm so glad you put it like that. If we play New England in the U.S. Open Cup or Nashville, which we had in 2023, or Orlando City or whatever, in the U.S. Open Cup, the stakes are so much higher. I think those games are so much more fun. And to counter one of the biggest talking points, and guys, please put them in the chat and we'll get to them. Jay said earlier, everybody talks about the U.S. Open Cup, but nobody really supports the attendance. Well, that's the same with the CONCACAF Champions Cup. It's the same with every single non-season pass in terms of people that have season tickets. Every single non-season ticket game is going to have low attendance, especially midweek games. It's true across the league. It's true both for the CONCACAF Champions Cup. It's true for the U.S. Open Cup. And so I feel like that's a terrible excuse to not participate in the tournament, especially, which goes to my second point. When you have this amount of squad depth, you have a real chance to win this tournament. Fafa Picault would be starting tonight if Inter Miami was playing tonight. And listen, if it was the A team, they wouldn't start the tournament this early. But if they were playing tonight, Fafa Picault, Robert Taylor, Cello Wiegand, like all these guys are really good, solid players for this level that aren't going to get a ton of playing time for the first team in the MLS because we have better players. You want to see Allen Obando go 90 minutes and score a hat trick? This is the game for you. You want to see Benjamin Kermaski get 2 assists to Obando? This is the game for you. And David Ruiz and Toto Aviles and David Martinez, like this team, Drake Callender, this team has the depth to go a very long way before you get to the quarterfinals, the semifinals, when teams would start taking it seriously and the fans would get really engaged. So for this team, it really does kind of stink because they have the talent to get there. And it's a shame we're not going to be able to participate.
And honestly, that's my biggest regret. The fact that we have so much talent, and this tournament would have been really, really good to test out some of our second tier teams and second team. And some of these players might actually have been able to play full minutes of football, like 90 minutes of football. And it may have actually benefited us for other tournaments, because if Fafa Pico absolutely becomes undroppable, scores hat trick after hat trick in the US Open, you would want to keep that form in the Leagues Cup or in the MLS. And I feel like we would have used our squad and our roster in a more wholesome manner if all these players also played in the US Open Cup and we were able to test out some of our second tier team as well. But it's unfortunate. This is what we're left with, but I still would love to see Inter Miami 2 do very well in this tournament. We have the players available today to be able to beat this Miami team, and then hopefully next game we can see how it goes.
Yeah, my last point, and I will end on this, because this is the one that I think gets forgotten about so much when these conversations happen. I am an Inter Miami fan. I like watching my team play. And if you're going to give me more games of my team playing, I consider that a good thing. And I don't understand fans that want less games, especially when you have the sort of depth that's not going to be detrimental to the rest of your season. It's an opportunity for another trophy, and I want to see my team compete for trophies, and this is a great one. Saur, I'll let you sort of respond to that, and then we'll wrap it up and go watch this game. But guys, thank you so much for being here. I'm sorry it's a little bit sort of in and out, but Saur, the floor is yours.
It's time. Inter Miami starts another tournament. Inter Miami 2 this time around. Whether it's the first team, whether it's the second team, whether it's the juniors, whenever my team plays, I am excited. I will always support them. Wish them all the luck, and I hope they go far in this tournament, because the further we go, the better we represent our academy. And honestly, people deserve to see how much talent there is in some of these youth MLS teams. So wishing them the best. I'm going to enjoy this game, and it's low stakes at least, but I feel like we still want to win. And I'm excited to see how this goes. Maybe a few players that we watch out for and come back and say, you know what, maybe in a year or two, these will be good additions to the first team. So exciting prospect, and I'm excited to watch this Inter Miami 2 team play tonight.
All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us. Please go watch the game. I know people complain about the support, but all you have to do is turn it on YouTube and you get to watch the US Open Cup. That's what we're going to go do. We will be back this weekend. We'll do some more Inter Miami A team stuff, more structured, all that. But for now, thank you for joining us. Thank you for getting in the chat. As always, you guys are the best part. We will see you guys next time. Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Do us a favor and hit that like and subscribe button. Since our first viewer, sharing this with you all has been the very best part. So from the beginning until the end, thank you for being a part of this, and have a wonderful day.